Wow.
social media use. She came up on stage and then from there had her camera taking a picture of everybody.
Oh my God.
Jennifer. And we testing their mics to make sure they work.
I am not sure.
Oh, there she is. That's her. Look at all that cable. Yeah, usually we skirt it, but it's not skirted.
Hello, hello. Correct.
Throughout my career, I was almost always the only woman, and I was almost always the only Black person. My name is Angela Benton. I'm the CEO and founder of NewMe Accelerator. NewMe Accelerator is a business incubator for minorities and women.
My name is Kisan Ferguson. I am the founder and CEO of Dweller.
My name is Frederick, and I'm the CEO and founder of Pigeonly.
It's a 12-week residential program based in San Francisco, and we bring entrepreneurs from around the country and connect them to our network in Silicon Valley. Google for Entrepreneurs is our biggest supporter. They realize and understand that entrepreneurship is diverse and Entrepreneurship applies to a lot of different people from a lot of different backgrounds.
No one in my family is an entrepreneur. I didn't go to Harvard or Stanford. I'm kind of a little bit more ratchet than the normal startup founder.
We was meeting different mentors, investors twice a week. You just sit in there in a room with them for an hour and you hammer out your business model.
My goal here is to help you guys identify problems before they become problems.
We are a business management application for real estate agents. We take the technology that agents use and condense it into one application. I moved a lot growing up. I mean, if we went to Columbus, I can count 10 different houses that I lived in. I actually love real estate. I love all aspects about it.
There are 2.3 million people who's currently incarcerated in the United States. Say you have a loved one who's currently incarcerated. You can go to our website and you can upload the photos you want to send him, and he'll actually receive 4x6 prints in the mail. No one understands this market better than me because I once was an inmate. Prison sucks, 100%. The way institutions are set up today, they just make it very difficult to keep in touch with your family and friends and loved ones. Most guys who are incarcerated, they don't have life sentences, so they're gonna be back on the street. Being in touch with his family, having a support structure by the time he's released, actually makes him much more likely to be successful and less likely to go back to prison.
The New Me Accelerator program, it's co-live, co-work. It's a flat, it's a small flat, and it's basically like going back to college. It's 8 adults living on bunk beds for 12 weeks.
Living in bunk beds, you know, for me, it's not a big deal. You know, it's similar to the county jail. You're in bunk beds. The New Me Accelerator bunk beds are a lot more comfortable.
I think there's a camaraderie about it that we're minority companies. It's African Americans, women. It's underrepresented companies that are out to prove something. Without New Me, nobody would have really known who I was. Now we're a team of 4 people. We have closed a round of funding and we're in the process of doing a second round.
We've gone to raise $1 million in seed funding. We've shipped over 40,000 photos and we've grown our team to 7. We wouldn't be here without going through that accelerator. New Me Accelerator, it took us from 50 to 500 miles an hour. A lot of my closest friends now, we're all employed because of this. If you have more of that, whole communities can be changed.
morning, ladies and gentlemen.
And former president of the Cuban American National Council. I'm delighted to be here. You know, it's been 22 years, long time, and we expect that there'll be another 22 years in the future. That is before we really get strong as we are now. So I'm delighted that we're doing this symposium again, the power of Hispanic inclusion. Throughout the symposium, HACR will feature panels and conversations with some of our community's most prominent experts, examining the lack of Hispanic inclusion across boardrooms and C-suites in corporate America. I hope this session will be insightful and informative for all of you. And for your information, it is being live streamed by Google, so you can watch it there. And now I'd like to introduce Dr. Lisette Garcia, our director, HACR's director of our research institute. She's brought a lot of professionalism to our research products who get better and better every year. So Dr. Garcia is the head of our research institute. Let's welcome Dr. Garcia.
Good morning, everyone. How are you doing? Glad to see so many of you got up nice and early for this exciting session that we're going to have. So quick reminder, this session is being live streamed, as Guadione mentioned, and that is sponsored by Google. And we will be taking questions from that live stream on the hashtag HACR 2014. So thank you, Guadione, for that introduction. I'm very excited to be here today with you all. To share with you what we have learned in the past 5 years from the Corporate Inclusion Index, but more importantly, to be able to have a conversation with our panelists regarding supplier diversity and the initiatives that their companies have or how they're engaging with Fortune 500 companies. But before we get to that conversation, let me tell you a little bit about the HACR Research Institute, or the HRI as it's more commonly referred to. The HRI publishes a number of different studies, including the Corporate Inclusion Index, the Corporate Governance Study, and this past year, our new initiative, the Employee Resource Group Study. This past year was our first year where we had 3 studies, in addition to a number of other projects that we were working on in the symposium and our annual programs. So we are excited to expand the work of the Research Institute, which is a component of HACR's corporate accountability strategy. Both the CII and the CGS were included in your conference bags. Additionally, the HRI is currently working on the procurement project that we will be discussing today. And these 3 reports, the ERG study, the Corporate Inclusion Index, and the Corporate Governance Study, can be viewed on the app and on our website in the research section. HACR's corporate accountability strategy is comprised of a number of different components. 2 of those components are the HACR Corporate Inclusion Index and the research and advocacy that we are performing through our other projects. So this was the 5th anniversary of the CII in its current format, and we are excited to report for the 5th consecutive year, the number of participants has increased. In 5 short years, we've been able to double the number of companies who have come on board, bringing the number that we are working with on the CII to 60 companies. It's quite an accomplishment for us to have reached that many companies, to gain their trust and to encourage them to be transparent with us in their work that they're doing and in their efforts to increase Hispanic inclusion within their organizations. Equally important is the fact that we have successfully been able to retain nearly 85% of our original participants throughout the past 5 years. And this year's report highlights those companies and thanks them for their continued commitment to the HACR CII and their commitment to Hispanic inclusion. So in 2009, when the CII in its current format was first released, we had 30 companies who participated. 25 of those companies continue to take the CII with us this year. That's an excellent retention rate for an index such as this nature. So in order to better understand why this conversation is important, allow me to provide a little contextual information, and hopefully the numbers will set the stage nicely for our conversation. According to published research, among American minorities, Hispanics are more likely to start their own businesses, and in fact, as you can see on the slide, their numbers have continually been increasing over time. So both between 2002 and 2007, and 2007 and 2013, the numbers of Hispanic owned businesses have increased at a rate that's greater than the general market companies, which is amazing given the economic situation during that time. So there's a lot to be said about this, and there's a lot to be said about the fact that even during the recession period of 2007 to 2010, Hispanic-owned businesses continued to grow at a rate that outpaced those of the general market companies. And although the growth slowed in the recession period, that growth still amounted to nearly doubling the number of firms between 2002 and 2013. So in that short time frame, we have seen an increase from 1.6 million Hispanic-owned businesses in 2002 to over 3 million in 2013. The census is set to release their latest study on Hispanic business enterprises in 2015. The data collection has already happened, and now they're working hard crunching numbers, and so we're excited to see that report released in the coming months. So of course, the fact that the report is not publicly available yet means that these figures are estimates, but the research world is confident in these projections, and if anything, it's likely that these estimates may be conservative, and we may actually see the numbers be higher. This figure that you can see on the slide represents an increase of over 100 billion in total sales receipts for Hispanic-owned businesses, which really represents tremendous growth for this segment and for the American economy. So keeping in mind that for this period, we're just coming out of a recession, but yet in that time period, Hispanic-owned businesses were able to increase the amount of total sales receipts by $100 billion. This is a fact that's really not widely discussed publicly. What we know about, and what we often hear about, is the impact that the Hispanic consumer is having on businesses. But what we need to start thinking about is the impact that those Hispanic-owned businesses are having on the economy overall. So research indicates that Hispanic-owned businesses will continue to play a major role in the economic recovery of the American economy. And the Hispanic population possesses an entrepreneurial spirit that is like that of no other group, evidenced in the fact that the growth of Hispanic-owned businesses has been happening at a rate that is nearly double that of the general population. These trends indicate that this is a segment of the U.S. economy that we not only need to understand better, but that corporate America also needs to tap into to sustain and grow their own businesses. So with that said, let's see how corporate America is doing this. So the focus of the HACR CII is to understand how Hispanics are faring in corporate America along HACR's 4 pillars: employment, procurement, philanthropy, and governance. So what you see on the screen is part 1 of the ratings report that participants receive when they take the survey. Yes?
Is it possible to show
Oh, they are? Josh, what slide is it on? I'm sorry. Yes, yeah, part 1? Okay. I think the battery might not be working. Sorry, in the age of advanced technology, there are always technical difficulties you have to deal with. Well, thanks for telling me now that the clicker wasn't working. Sheesh. Where were you guys 10 minutes ago? No, start over again, yeah. How about this? How about if I just prompt somebody to advance the slide for me from the back? Will that work? Yes. So I'm not sure that we can do that. Yeah, Josh is going to work on it. Okay, great. So anyway, here's how we can deal with this. Does everyone have the app downloaded on their telephone? Yes. Okay, great. For those of you who don't, do you have your conference bags with the actual printed CII in it? Yeah, now That's actually better for me because I couldn't see it either, so. Anyway, so if you download the app, actually, and you look at the publications section, you can actually see the CII report, and you can scroll through it on your phone while I'm giving my presentation, so you can actually see some of the things that I'm talking about. And if you have the printed report, you can actually flip through the pages, and I'll tell you where we are. So if we can go to the first one that looks like a ratings report screen. See, the presentation was good, I promise. Couple more. I don't know who's doing it. Maybe 12? Try slide 12. Okay. Yep, there we go. Let's go there. All right. Can everyone see that now? Okay, great. Okay, well, if you can't see it because it's too small, that's what the big screen was for. Oh, okay, we're good. We're good. All right. So back to where we were. So the focus of the HACR CII is to really assess how companies are doing along the 4 pillars that HACR values, which are employment, procurement, philanthropy, and governance. And so each company that takes the report receives a detailed rating card like this, or a ratings report, and we conduct a one-on-one telephone conversation with the folks for that particular company to help them understand where are the areas where they have the opportunity to improve their rating and to congratulate them on the things that they're actually doing well. So this particular snippet is actually the 2 sections for employment and for procurement. And so you can see that the rating, which is out of a total of 100 points, has a number of different elements. There are 5 in the employment section, and then there are 3 in the procurement section. And then if you go to the next slide. So here are the additional 2 sections, and that is the philanthropy and the governance section. And then you can see what the criteria are for those 2 sections as well. So these 4 sections combined actually comprise a CII rating for a participating company. And what you see here, and if you look at the report itself, this is included in the report, or if you're looking at it on the app, you can see how the aggregate or the sample collectively would have rated on the 2013 HACR CII. So this is something new that we're trying this year to help companies understand or give them perspective of how they fare compared to the other companies who are taking the index as well. So the overall sample would have rated an 85, which is not too shabby. I mean, that's a pretty good score on the HACR CII. However, there are opportunities for improvement, and one of the opportunities that we've identified for improvement is the procurement section. So in the procurement section, the sample itself scored 15 out of a possible 20 points. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what those elements are and take a closer look at that procurement section. So if you could advance to the next slide, please. Okay. So what we learned this year from the CII is that, on average, participants are directing about 2% of their total procurement spend to Hispanic-owned businesses. and that nearly all of the participants in the study itself are working with trade organizations or other groups to help find new Hispanic suppliers to work with, to help develop the ones that they have, to really try and grow that segment and to help not only the community, but to continue to make themselves relevant in the global marketplace. Additionally, the highest reported spend was about 10% with Hispanic suppliers. So that's actually a pretty good number. Of course, we'd like to see that number increase, and it wasn't. There was only one company who really scored that high, or who had awarded that percentage of contracts to Hispanic-owned businesses. And so we'd like to see all 60 companies having a 10% spend with Hispanic-owned businesses. But we recognize that it's a work in progress, and still there's opportunity here for improvement. Now, having said that we did have the one company with the 10% spend, nearly 20% of the participants reported that their spend with Hispanic-owned businesses was actually less than 1%. So if you think about the millions or billions of dollars that companies are spending with their suppliers, less than 1% of that for the majority of the group is actually going to Hispanic-owned businesses. So obviously there's room for improvement here, and there's work that can be done. In addition to these figures, one of the things that you don't see up here is that nearly 20% of the participating companies opted not to disclose this information on the survey this year, which may sound like a lot, but if I tell you that in 2009, only 17% of the participating companies actually reported, this is quite an improvement for us. So we're getting companies to really be more transparent, we're getting companies to open up to the conversation, to be willing to work with us about how it is that they could be doing better with their Hispanic-owned businesses. Can we go to the next slide? Thanks. So 156 versus 18,000. Seems kind of shocking. Those numbers represent the number of Hispanic suppliers versus the number of suppliers generally that were reported by the participating companies in the CII. So on average, companies reported that they work with 18,000 suppliers, of which only 156 are Hispanic-owned businesses. So clearly there's an opportunity here for us to be working with new suppliers, trying to diversify who companies are working with, and to really try to leverage the resources that perhaps HACR or some of its coalition members can offer in terms of connecting companies with those suppliers. Can we go to the next one? Thanks. So 5%. Doesn't seem like a lot, but from our perspective, it is. That's the number, the proportion of companies who are not tracking their supplier diversity by demographic group. So if those 5% of the companies who participated in the CII were actually putting the mechanisms in place to be able to tell us how they're doing with diverse suppliers, and this is suppliers generally. This is not just Hispanic suppliers. This is diverse suppliers. So women, African Americans, Asian Americans, veterans, right? So these are all kinds of suppliers, and 5% of the participating companies aren't tracking that. They don't know. They don't have any metrics in place to help them understand how they're working with or utilizing their companies, those companies, or ways to better work with those companies because they're not actually tracking. So at this point, perhaps our panelists might be able to provide some insights about mechanisms that they have in place to track their spend with diverse suppliers. And I'm anxious to hear about what they have to say. Can you go to the next one? Thank you. So I'm actually going to stop here. I think that there's a lot more that we can learn from our panelists, and I'm ready to hear about what they have to say, and I hope you're ready to hear about what they have to say. So just a reminder, you can ask your questions via Twitter using the hashtag HACR2014. There will be mics floating around the room for folks to ask questions of our panelists when they do make it up here. So without further ado, let me introduce our panel and get them up here so you can start the talking. So our first panelist is Karen Bowman. Karen began her career with AT&T in 1984 and has experience in large and small business sales, business marketing, and supply chain inclusion. Karen currently serves as a diversity sourcing manager, managing AT&T's sourcing opportunities for a number of AT&T's largest minority suppliers. Welcome, Karen. Our second panelist is Lucy Magdaleno. She is the Supplier Diversity Manager for Global Procurement at MGM Resorts International. She manages the company's supplier diversity efforts throughout the corporation's 15 hotels and casinos in Nevada, Michigan, and Mississippi. Hi.
Thank you.
And our last panelist is Ron Alvarado, a partner and chief administrative officer of SBM Management, a company primarily involved in the facility maintenance service businesses throughout the U.S., Canada, and Central America. Ron's role as chief administrative officer includes the responsibility to provide executive-level management in the administration and growth of SBM. So let's give them all a round of applause. Welcome them up here.
Thank you.
And I'm going to kick off the conversation by asking Karen and Lucy to tell us about their supplier diversity programs and ask Ron to tell us a little bit about SBM. Karen?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today with all of you. And honestly, I have the luxury of attending a lot of events throughout the year, and it's great to see a full house. Most recently, it's been much more sparsely attended, so applause to all of you for attending today. AT&T is very blessed. We have a very large supplier diversity team. We're located across the country in order to outreach consistently across the country to interested suppliers. We have approximately 22 folks on the team. And our goals, which are given to us by our chairman, have been consistent over the years. He is highly committed, as AT&T is a global company, to having a diverse sourcing and procurement program. We outreach to the public by attending events such as this. Our team coaches numerous suppliers. We have formal programs where we educate suppliers as to what it takes really to do business with a company like AT&T. We offer scholarships, entrepreneurial scholarships, in partnership with some of the large organizations like NMSDC and WeBank in order to help our potential suppliers gain that entrepreneurial knowledge. And we work very closely, and a very important part of our sourcing program is working closely with our prime suppliers. Because AT&T is a very large company with a global footprint, we procure on a global basis or on a national basis. Oftentimes that's challenging for our smaller, diverse-owned businesses because they just simply don't have the capacity to be able to source directly to AT&T, especially when they're starting business. Obviously, as business continues to develop, there's a changing story. But oftentimes we're asked about how about me? I'm new to the business, or I've been in business less than 5 years. I'm really starting to ramp up. What can AT&T do for me? And what we do in situations like that is partner very closely with our prime suppliers and ask them to be active participants also in a diversity program. And by doing that, they outreach to the smaller minority suppliers and develop those businesses so that ultimately they can win direct opportunities with AT&T. So that partnership is really key to our success.
Okay. Well, can you hear me? Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you so much for inviting me. MGM Resorts is a leader in entertainment and hospitality, and we strongly believe in our corporate responsibility, social responsibility. And we have 3 pillars within our social responsibility: diversity and inclusion. We're very strong in diversity and inclusion, sustainability, and philanthropy. And our supplier diversity program, it's an integral part of a culture, and we've had a lot of success. Our program was established in 2000, and it was during the merger of the MGM Grand and the Mirage properties. And we had community leaders that were very interested in knowing what were we doing for the community. So our former chairman, the late Terry Lanny, he went back and researched, and we found out that we were already doing a substantial amount of spend with diverse suppliers. But he didn't want to stop there. He wanted to keep going. So that was when our program was born. We are the first gaming company to publicly report our numbers. And in 2003, we adopted a formal policy that every order over $1,000 must contain three bidders, and one of them has to be a diverse company. And since the program inception, we have spent over $1 billion with my diverse-owned businesses. And within our staff, there's 3, and we oversee the supplier diversity program nationwide. My executive director, Kenyatta Lewis, then myself, and Jesse Ramirez. Okay.
Well, good morning. I'm Ron Alvarado with SBM Management. SBM Management is a full-fledged building maintenance and facilities management company. We basically do janitorial, housekeeping, vendor management, and bundled packages for large facilities across the country. We were founded in 1982. I've been with the company since 1993, and in that capacity as an owner and as a member of the leadership there. We've grown to a great extent because of our commitment to not only our own internal diversity, but also seeking out and promoting diverse suppliers from those that come to work for us. We are not obviously as large as AT&T or MGM Grand. We're about we have 6,000 employees, and we service about 350 million square feet of different facilities types of properties. Like I said, we're in about 47 states. We're in Canada. We're in Central America, and just last year have broken into the Singapore market. So we have enjoyed the benefits of not only being a good supplier, an efficient supplier to our customers over the years, but like I say, have also been very much engaged in the minority business enterprise side of things as well.
Thank you. So are there any questions in the audience? There's a mic coming. Yep. It might be easier if we maybe make a little queue, maybe over here, and that way we can go through our questions. There's a little button.
No, we are good.
You're good, Monica.
Good morning. Monica Frias from WellPoint. You know, I'm curious to see whether or not any of your organizations leverage your associate resource groups to diversify your supplier base. And if you do so, you know, what are some of the things that you're doing to involve associates from these diverse employee resource groups, associate resource groups, or however you call them, into those efforts?
Anyone feel?
I'll be glad. I'll take a swipe at that. For AT&T, we have a number of employee resource groups, and many of those groups are extremely active, and they run the gamut in every flavor, color, you know, whatever anybody's interested in. It's just employee resource groups are supported from a corporate level, and we absolutely do engage those organizations when it comes to the activities that the supplier diversity team it takes part in. I'll give an example. I was the national lead for the service-disabled veteran outreach, and I always touched bases with the ERG group supporting the veterans and asked for guidance or recommendations when I was on the hunt for a particular type of enterprise that they may be able to point me in the right direction. We also engage them as ambassadors for the supplier diversity team, and we have a formal training for our supplier diversity ambassadors. We'll outreach to these employee resource groups, we'll encourage them to participate, and then when we host an event where AT&T does matchmaking with potential suppliers and our buyers or our primes, we will request that we have support from our ERGs. So they're very much engaged.
Mm-hmm. Yes, MGM Resorts also does annual trainings with all of our corporate procurement specialists, and we want to make sure that supplier diversity stays in the forefront of all their decision making.
We don't have a formal ERG program, but how I think I could reflect on that is that we have many site and regional managers, and they are responsible to report into our procurement division, which does have a diversity manager, to report on efforts to try to attract MBEs, women-owned business, veterans-owned businesses. So we try to interact that way, and from our viewpoint, that's best for us and hopefully for our customers and potential vendors of diverse vendor suppliers, because it's our site managers that are literally out in the field and operating at the facilities which we service that can give us pretty good feedback, and they are responsible to report on their diverse spends each year. So we have some pretty accurate numbers about the percentage of our diversity spend, and that's based on these regional managers trying to come together and broaden that pool.
Good morning. My name is Martha Montoya, NHP. Access to capital seems to be the biggest issue for minority suppliers to grow. Just attended a large corporation bringing the banks and the financial institutions to the ground to work with the suppliers. Have your companies created any program where minority suppliers are able to be enticed to work with your financial institutions to create specific programs for them so they can grow their business within your organization, or has not been yet connected within your organization? Those two items, supplier diversity and access to capital.
We don't, to be perfectly candid. We aren't large enough. What we will do in working with minority suppliers, if they can provide us with the same high level of service, they're efficient, they're cost effective, and in the end, they're working towards the same goals that we are, and that is to service our customers. We will give them a little bit, we'll try to pay them a little faster. We'll try to give them a little bit more access to our regional suppliers so that they can take advantage of some purchasing volumes, cost savings for them. But we have not had a program thus far that brings our bank into that realm.
Yeah, MGM Resorts doesn't have that program, but we do provide resources to those companies. And then we also, anytime a supplier is running late on or we're running late on a payment, we offer our services to have them contact us and give us those invoices, and we can try to expedite them as fast as we can.
To my knowledge, AT&T does not have a particular finance type outreach. And if I'm not correct on that, I'll definitely get back and make sure I correct the record there. But one thing I can say is we have standard rules that once you're a supplier and you have been contracted to do work for AT&T, or even if you've been contracted by a prime, it doesn't matter. Once you've signed the contract, you're a supplier, and everybody is treated equally. So do we have a program that will help you get paid faster? No. And we pay net 60 to our direct suppliers, and oftentimes that means if you're a tier 2 to a prime, you're going to be in that same cycle. So once you've signed the contract, we've contracted with you because we believe that you're the best supplier for the job. and we're looking for you to perform to the standards that AT&T has, and we treat you just like everybody else.
Good afternoon. It's still afternoon, right? Okay. Deneen Garcia, Macy's, Inc. Thank you all for being here. And I'm just wondering if any one of the three panelists, or even somebody in the audience, frankly, has encountered any sort of program, any sort of aggregation by suppliers. You can only wonder, a company like ours, and maybe some of yours, the volume is so great that minority suppliers cannot, based on capital, based on all of these factors. However, have you seen any aggregation of, let's say, competitors that decide to get together and respond to an RFP and say, you know what, we can put our differences aside for the purposes of servicing a company like Macy's or AT&T or MGM, and we can have the volume? Have you heard or seen a successful program or a successful endeavor such as that?
We have actually witnessed that happening. There were two lighting companies that came together. One of them was happened to have an expo on that day, and we invited one of their competitors to come and sit with them, and out of that, there was a partnership that grew from there.
We see that frequently as well, partnerships, joint ventures. We certainly counsel. The one thing we don't want to see is a very small minority company going to a very large majority company and then basically presenting themselves to AT&T as the minority company is really doing the project. When we're procuring, we're looking for the person who we're procuring with to, in fact, be leading, managing, executing the project, and not just simply being the front door for somebody else who's doing the work. So that, of course, would be a concern when we're talking under the minority umbrella. But it definitely works. And I think that we counsel to the extent that our sourcing teams will advise suppliers what AT&T is looking for. But as far as the actual legal setup, et cetera, of their structure, we are hands off on that. They have to go ahead, work that out themselves, come back to us and present their solution.
So if I can interject here, I think Deneen's raising a really interesting point. And so I think the bigger question here for me is, you know, what might be some of the challenges that you're facing sourcing to Hispanic suppliers or vendors? And maybe, Ron, if you could talk about how you guys have dealt with that, how you know, if that's even been a concern for you guys, or, you know, how to get around that.
Well, said from our standpoint, I think in our earlier days, we were challenged because we were a small company. We had a few hundred employees, and when we tried to break into the larger Fortune 500 arena, it was tough because we weren't looked upon as being able, not so much from a capital standpoint, but from a standpoint of, do these folks have the expertise? Can they really handle the different sites we have? Because some of the sites we work with our Intel clients or with Johnson & Johnson or some of our pharmaceutical companies, they have these very large facilities. And in the early days, it was tough. And one company in particular gave us a chance, Procter & Gamble back in Cincinnati. And I think that they did so because we convinced them that we could handle the job. And once we did so, and to follow up the previous question, we did so by partnering up, not in the strict sense of the word, but we looked for vendors that would, quote unquote, partner with us, that could make sure that the client was taken care of. And once we got over that first threshold, it became quite easy. And part of that became after the fact when we became certified by NMSDC, which in itself was kind of this, we didn't know how to handle that and didn't know how to go through the process, but it was fine. And once we got through that, and once we got one national client and a couple others that gave us a chance, kind of the water was over the dam. And it was rather easy after that. We had a few sleepless nights trying to make sure we were going to be able to do what we said we were going to do, but we did it. And it didn't take long before those 1 or 2 Fortune 500 companies that expanded to several, which we're proud and very grateful to be working for today. So it is a challenge, but it can be overcome.
Mm-hmm. Some of the challenges that we have, they're not just isolated to one diverse group. And one of them is over-promising and not being able to deliver. And then not providing an accurate picture of what their capabilities are. So are not ready to perform. Not being compliant with our purchasing policies. Some of our suppliers, they'll go directly to our properties and want to deal directly with the end user. And then if there's an issue, then we can't help them because they didn't come through the right source. And also not being able to keep up with the licenses and the certificates. Our program requires certification, so it's not being able to count those dollars also.
I think AT&T would echo that too, that the challenges are the same, whether you're minority owned or majority owned. If you're small and you're majority owned, you have the same challenges as if you're small and minority owned. One of the challenges absolutely that we find, because when we look at the broad base of suppliers, again, whether they're majority or minority, there's a small number of really, really big guys and a lot smaller guys. Generally, a rule of thumb, which I think will help you understand AT&T's position from a financial perspective, we do not want to offer annual contracts that exceed 1/3 of total revenues. So if you put that into perspective and think a little bit about the size and scope of those AT&T contracts, that can become very challenging in and of itself. And I think AT&T is not that company necessarily that's going to offer you your first opportunity at working with a Fortune 100. We like to see that you've been there, done that, and have done a great job, and then we're more inclined to open and embrace. But all of that being said, we absolutely take those suppliers that are working towards the direct opportunity and work with them aggressively to position them with our prime suppliers.
So I know I got the signal that we have a question from the Twitter feed, but before we do that, I just want to touch on something that I think I heard you guys say. So Ron, I heard you mention the NMSDC, and Lucy, you said you guys require it, and I'm sure AT&T does as well. And this is a conversation that comes up with us when we're doing our CII review calls about companies in many ways kind of being handcuffed because they require that certification, but the businesses aren't able to or don't quite understand the process and think that it requires something more perhaps than it actually does, or resources that they can't afford to allocate. So before we take that social media question, I just wanted to ask Ron about that, if you can talk a little bit about that process and maybe demystify it.
Sure, Lisette. Yeah, when we were first asked if we were part of NMSDC, we weren't, and we were a little apprehensive about it because it was this mystique. It was so easy. NMSDC was chartered in 1972. There are about 16,000 MBEs that are certified today across the country. The only requirement is that you do have a 51% ownership that is minority and that you're a for-profit entity. There are about 3,500 corporate members of NMSDC, which provides a wonderful opportunity for the MBEs to get face-to-face with corporate America. But the process was very easy. You basically apply to one of, I think there's 35 or 36 councils around the country. You make application. They review some of your financials. They are thorough to make sure that your ownership is truly stated and is accurate. They will traditionally send an audit team to your facility to spend some time with you and look at your offices. And I think, like Karen mentioned, and these companies want to make sure that you are what you say you are. And so the process was not that involved. We were certified, I believe, in 2004. And a year after we were certified, one of our customers asked us if we wanted to apply for Corporate Plus. Corporate Plus of NMSDC is a program that recognizes vendors or manufacturers or suppliers of any kind that can actually supply an AT&T or an MGM or a pharmaceutical company or an Intel across broad scope of facilities. Because a lot of time, in my view, what the large companies are looking for, they're looking for those efficiencies. And if they can work with fewer vendors, it's easier for them. So anyway, NMSDC was very easy, and it was not complicated and doesn't cost much money. And we take advantage of the associations and contacts we've made over the years. We participate annually in their trade fair. And I believe that we're certified by, I think we're certified in about 15 or 20 councils. So that puts us, that covers the 45 or 47 states that I believe we're currently operating in right now. But it's, I think in San Diego, for example, it's the Southwest Council, which covers San Diego County and Arizona. So it's in Sacramento where our headquarters are. We actually go out of the Northern California office, which is in Oakland. So there's region, you can easily contact the regional councils, and they're happy to work with you.
Thank you. So, Josh, where'd you go? Okay, great.
Question from Twitter is, why do you index and how has it impacted your supplier diversity initiatives?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Yeah, how do you
so with the
index?
CI, why do you participate in the index, and how has that impacted your supplier diversity initiatives?
So what's the value, I think, from your perspective for MGM or AT&T in participating in something like the Corporate Inclusion Index, where we're taking a look at what your programs are and how you're doing? What would be the value for you guys?
For MGM Resorts, I think the value is we're increasing the pool of suppliers. The more opportunities that we bring in, the more we increase the, I guess you could say, the competition. So the more competition, the more we can drive our pricing down.
I think, too, that it's just a question of raising awareness out there. AT&T's been involved in supplier diversity for years and years and decades and decades. And we need to spread the word. There are wonderful, competent, qualified minority suppliers. And business needs to corporate America needs to understand that. And by participating in these types of programs, I think we can be an advocate for the good work that the minority suppliers do, and we can certainly be an advocate for other corporations who are leaning towards looking at the opportunity that these minority suppliers provide.
So I know, and I'm going to take a little moderator privilege here. I know one of the things that I always wonder about when I'm having these kinds of conversations with folks is really wanting to get a better handle on, aside from just the numbers, like looking at the numbers and looking how much your diverse spend has increased over time, but what other metrics do you guys have in place? And Ron, I heard you talking about how you evaluate the suppliers that you guys work with, but what metrics do you have in place to not only evaluate the performance of the suppliers that you're working with, but to also evaluate the success of your programs, right? So how do you assess how well your supplier diversity program is doing?
At MGM Resorts, we measure the success of a program by all those suppliers that are being included in our sourcing RFPs. And then we also track what was the success rate of that. If a supplier was not awarded a contract, then we want to know, the supplier diversity team wants to know the reason why. And if they choose not to have the conversation with the diverse supplier, then we'll do it on their behalf, and we'll have that candid conversation with them, just so we're all in understanding, and then they don't fail the next time around.
And I think it's clear we're very much in sync in a number of the processes that we do. So certainly our sourcing folks, when it comes to issuing an RFP, they are, I hate to use the term required, but in essence, they're required, and certainly they look for inclusion of minority companies. They track how many RFPs are going out, and of that, what's the percentage of the minority suppliers that are included. We track responses, and our team is also engaged understanding if a minority supplier won, why did they win? If they didn't happen to make the cut, why not? If they failed to respond, why didn't they respond? And we use all of that as a coaching opportunity to go back to the supplier and speak to them so that the next opportunity that comes their way potentially will be more successful. We also do a tremendous amount of outreach into the community by doing AT&T hosted matchmaking opportunities. AT&T participates in events such as this across the country with all types of organizations, and we poll attendees so that we have feedback and can understand how can we do better? What do you really want to hear from us? Sometimes it's difficult when we're asked to participate in a panel and we have certain questions that may come up or may not come up, but what do you really want to know about the potential of working for AT&T? And so we try and get that feedback, and then we have teams that review, and we're constantly looking at changing so that we can better address the next event, that type of thing. But getting that cycle of feedback from our suppliers is so critical to our success. We have a CEO conference twice a year. We're gearing up for another one the 1st of May in Dallas, and that's an opportunity for the president of our supply chain to hear directly from the CEOs and to tell them also face-to-face how and what AT&T is looking for in the future. But getting that direct feedback is critical to the success of our program.
Alma has a question.
Yes.
We'll get to you in a second.
Thank you, Lisette. Just a quick question, maybe more for you, Lisette, and then maybe the rest of the panel can kind of chime in. But I'm just curious, have you done any research with respect to where is the pool of Hispanic suppliers? I mean, I think about the different industries that exist and whether or not there is a Hispanic supplier base to satisfy that need. It's all about demand and supply, if you will, right? And I'm just wondering if that's been analyzed to see where the gaps exist, even for opportunities, given we all have that entrepreneurial spirit of where we would need to develop in an area if it's not available. I think it's Karen, correct, indicated one, she has to have 3 bids and one of them has to be a minority supplier. What happens when there's not a minority supplier available for that, area? Is that shared or whatever? Mm-hmm. So just wondering if there's research done for that.
So on our end, we haven't officially done anything. I can tell you that the more conversations that I've been having about procurement, I recognize that companies are really looking for a place where they can go and they can find certified Hispanic-owned businesses that will fill X need or Y need, and that it's not in those areas that people commonly go to. They have the office supply servicers, they have the janitorial companies, they have an over sort of index in certain areas. It's those really challenging areas that right now there isn't anyone who can really provide a comprehensive list, to my knowledge. There are some places that you can go and you can see a list of the top 500 companies, Hispanic-owned companies in the U.S. But a list where a company could actually go to it and get a supplier in X area or Y area or a recommendation for that doesn't exist with us. We are hoping to perhaps work with someone to create that and to offer that, but at this time, we don't. Now, it's actually one of my questions here to ask the panel. So great job, Alma, for that introduction into that. So what is the process for you guys when you're trying to identify diverse suppliers? Or, and Ron, for you, how do you guys get yourselves out there so that other companies know that you exist?
Well, let's see, two parts here. I think in terms of how we attract diverse spend. When we first started tracking it, I believe in 2004, 2005, about 2% that we could identify were with diverse vendors. And I set a goal. I says, I'd like to see that more to 5 or 7% here in the next 4 or 5 years. Let's see what we can do. But again, the criteria was I couldn't afford to open the door just to minority vendors. I wanted quality suppliers that believed in value, that could help us support our end-use customer. Because the success of my business relies on the many vendors that we are privileged to have working for us. So that was the first criteria, but it was rather easy for us because we're basically in the janitorial business. We do more than that, but that's a large segment of our business. And for us, it was easy to identify a small mom-and-pop window washing company, in Chicago, or another group up in Seattle that did things. So it was pretty easy for us, but we're up to about a little over 13% spend, and I'm pretty happy with that considering where we were. And now I totally lost the second part of the question. Sorry. How do we attract?
So the first part was how do you find them, and then the second part would be, how did you make yourself available, or how did companies find you, basically?
They found us. I'd like to believe they found us because we did a good job for them. That's the start. And like I said earlier, one customer well, I can mention names here, right? Hewlett-Packard was. We had Hewlett-Packard. We were cleaning part of their plant outside of Sacramento, California. And they came to us and says, "Guys, you guys are really doing a good job for us. Would you like to do a plant up in Corvallis, Oregon for us?" I mean, oh my gosh, no, we're just a little company here that does Northern California stuff. But they said, well, why don't you give it a try? So we did. And every time that we grew, even though that was a small incremental growth, that took us from maybe 250 employees to maybe 300 employees or 350. But we made it a point to wherever we went and wherever a client, a customer had confidence and faith to take us, we made sure that we planted a flag in that area or that community with good people, good managers, good employees, so that we could grow in that marketplace. So when HP took us from Sacramento up to Hillsboro, Oregon, within a couple months they were saying, gee, how about going to Utah? How about going to Colorado with us? But we didn't just go and follow that particular customer. We went with the goal in mind that we were going to go and we were going to grow in those markets. So that's how we grew. But someone had to have a little confidence and a little faith in us that we could do the job, and we did. We just worked hard and we got over that hurdle, and pretty soon, wherever we went, people recognized us as an organization that could provide them services on a broader basis. And so it took a little luck, it took a lot of hard work, and it ultimately worked. I'll share a quick story. We were asked to go to Costa Rica. This is 2000, 2001 for a customer that we were doing business with in other parts of the United States. And we said, oh, well, we don't know anything about Costa Rica. I don't think we could do that. It sounds like a great place to vacation, but I didn't know what we would do about setting up a business down there. So they asked us a second time. And I still am hem-hawing and going, oh, gee, I don't know. And well, the third time a customer asks you to do something or consider it, you do it, right? So we said, okay. And then they said, well, you have to be up and operating in 30 days. And we're going, oh, okay, well, we can open up a little office and get going. Well, so I flew down to Costa Rica, and I realized you can't open a bank account down there in 30 days. I mean, they think you're running drugs or whatever it might be. So you really, it took a while, but we did it. We did it in 22 days. And that's not a way of bragging about something. It's just a way of saying that, we were a little lucky, and we had a customer that was willing to give us the opportunity. And we just made it work. And we made it work on value, hard work, and efficiency and service for that customer.
AT&T does outreach, if I can just add to where do we go? How do we identify potential suppliers? Last year we did a lot of soul searching. We looked at our traditional alignment with various organizations, and we decided, you know what? We've been stuck in the same silo for way too long. We have to look elsewhere because our business model has changed. So AT&T, in order to find the right suppliers for tomorrow, we needed to revisit who we're going to be tomorrow. So we're not the same old phone company. We don't need the same types of suppliers that we did traditionally. So now we have realigned ourselves, or not realigned, I should say, we've expanded our alignment to include organizations like the Entrepreneurial organization, which is very focused on the high-tech world. We did a lot of research that helped us understand who are these organizations, where do they reside, you know, what is the demographic, et cetera. And now we're participating in events that we never participated in before. And for AT&T, that's really important because the stable of suppliers that are there today, some of them will source to us in the future, but many of them will not, just simply because, I'll give you an example, the folks who we used to buy backup tapes from, guess what? We don't buy backup tapes anymore, or certainly not in the volumes that we used to. So unless that supplier shifts to the new world and identifies where within AT&T in the future are they going to be, we have to look elsewhere. So we did that soul searching last year, and I think we're on the way to realigning and expanding alignment with some of those organizations.
Okay. So your question was, how do we identify Hispanic suppliers? Or well, our company recognizes minorities, women, the veterans, service-disabled veterans, and the LGBT. So we have corporate partners with NMSDC, with WeBank, and every year we look at our sourcing plan. So we find out what are the contracts that are going to go out for the year. And we source through, for NMSDC, it's embassies. For WeBank, they have their website with all their suppliers. For veterans, there's VetViz. So that's how we do. And we also attend conferences every year. So we're at NMSDC, we're at WeBank.
I know Brent had a question earlier. I think Paulina's, yep, there she is.
Thank you. I'm Brent Welks with the League of United Latin American Citizens, and my question has to do with the Tier 2 supplier efforts and how strongly do you push that? Is that something where you actually give perhaps a specific goal for your Tier 1 suppliers to come up with more Tier 2 diversity spend? And is there a good metric, I guess, or a good reporting system that you use to track that information?
AT&T has a very formalized program. We absolutely track our prime suppliers. We have a good fit. If any of the legal folks for AT&T are listening now, you know, they can arrest me later, but we have a good faith effort is the contract clause. That's my understanding. So it's in their contract, the prime supplier, that they will take a percentage of the AT&T contract and sub that out to diverse firms. And I believe today the standard good faith effort clause still says 21.5%. We have a team. Their whole reason for existence within the supplier diversity team is to assist the prime suppliers in meeting those goals. So depending on the volume of spend with a particular prime, and it runs the gamut from billions of dollars down to millions of dollars, but if depending on that total volume, we meet with them monthly, we meet with them quarterly, we meet with them semi-annually, depending on what it is. So the larger you are, the more often you are in constant contact with folks from the AT&T Supplier Diversity Prime Supplier team. We help you identify if you're a prime. If you're not meeting your goals, we talk to you, where do you have opportunity? And we will host a matchmaking opportunity, either face-to-face or virtually, where that prime supplier has an opportunity to interview a variety of perspectives to sub-work out to. And we'll do that and do that on a regular basis throughout the year. So it is definitely a partnership, and we try to emphasize that both with our future potential subs and with our primes. The primes have to be engaging with us and share with us where the opportunity exists. We have to understand enough about that opportunity, so we do the vetting on their behalf to try and narrow the pool, and then we bring them together, and we then step out of the cycle and turn the responsibility over to the prime, because at the end of the day, the prime has the liability. And we're not going to say you must hire X because they're Hispanic or Y because they're something else. We do not do that. But we will bring to the table a variety of minority suppliers and then monitor the success of those meetings and the outcome and measure the success to their good faith effort.
MGM Resorts also has a clause in all contracts that are going out that we encourage those companies to report back to us those dollars that are spent with diverse-owned businesses. And we have two forms. We do indirect and indirect. In our direct, we have about 15 companies that are currently reporting, and on the direct, we have about 10. And those companies come back every year, every quarter. We do it on a quarterly basis, and they give us those numbers. And we do hound them for that. Yeah, we have a good success with that. And every year we have a target list. So we look at our total spend and who's over a certain threshold, and we target those. And during our orientations that we do for our procurement officers, we have them look at the list and see who are they engaging, and then we ask them that on our behalf, because we don't have the relationships with those companies, that they reach out to them and just make the connection, just plant the seed, and then have them talk to us so we can educate them on the process.
Can I add one more thing to that too? Because I think it's important to know, whether you're a majority prime for AT&T or a minority prime for AT&T, everybody has that good faith clause in their contract. And I think that's important to hear that and understand that we expect the same from our minority primes. The minority prime needs to have a supply chain that is committed to supplier diversity, just like the majority primes do. And I think that's really important. And sometimes for me, when I am working with some of our largest minority primes, I have to poke them a little bit harder to say, hey, what about you all? I don't see that you're meeting those goals. Why not? And then, we have those conversations. But I think that's good for everyone to know and to understand, that it doesn't matter the ownership. At the end of the day, if we're spending a certain amount of money with you, we're going to expect you to have a supplier diversity program.
So I think I saw the microphone go up in the back. Is there a question back there?
Hi, my name is Stephanie, and I'm with Bank of America. The question that I have is around the lens on minority-owned businesses and the emphasis from a corporate perspective, the business perspective, and also from HACR's perspective around social enterprises. So at Bank of America, we agree and also share the sentiment today around the challenges around competitiveness and capacity of our supplier diversity efforts and the vendors we look to work with. But there's also a lens from a corporate social responsibility perspective around social enterprises, those businesses that also use their employment efforts to train the underemployed and unemployed. So the question that I have for the panel, including you, Dr. Garcia, is there value or is there impact that you see with the existing paradigm around supplier diversity and this whole movement around supporting social enterprises that are focused on social good?
So I'll let you guys go first about whether or not you're doing social enterprises, so I get a few more minutes to think about it.
I am in the supplier diversity world, and that's really a question that is not within my purview. I just really can't answer that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I can't either.
So for those of you who know, I'm a sociologist by training. Ron, did you want to comment? No?
No, I
It's a great question.
I'll
it's
take
a
your
great
number.
question.
I'll make sure you get the answer.
So thanks, Stephanie. I think it's a great question. And as I was saying, I am a sociologist by training. So obviously the social good, is sort of my background. That's where I come from. So of course we'd want to recognize and support companies that are taking that into consideration and that are making that extra effort to support smaller companies who have those mechanisms in place to help the community. I mean, at the end of the day, I think no matter who we are, we're all working to make sure that our companies are thriving, they're growing, and whatever enterprise it is that provides the service that we need, that's what we want, right? So, we recognize that, we think that that's great, and I'm happy to have a conversation with you about it offline because I'd like to hear about the things that you guys are doing more in detail. Yeah. Are there other questions in the audience? Social media? Okay. So we're kind of getting towards the end of our time here, and so I want to ask you guys one last question, sort of thinking about what advice you might offer, what best practices you could share with the audience, either in terms of what you guys have done, how you've been able to attract more suppliers to work with you, how you've been able to generate that more business, sort of that wrap-up comment that you would like to leave the audience with today.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll start from a small business perspective. I think it's just a philosophy that we've always had since day one is that, again, I'm repeating myself, but you do the best you can for your customer. You try to keep in mind the price and the efficiency with which you can provide services. You're open to all people to come and work with you and contribute towards the success of your company, because I think if they're contributing towards their own personal success, they are indirectly contributing to the success of the company. So we're very happy and proud of our successes over the year. We're very grateful to a large number of companies that have given us a chance, and once they did, we worked hard to prove ourselves, and some of our customers have been on the books for many, many years. And we have to keep reinventing ourselves, as Karen said. We do. We have to keep looking at ourselves as well. And how are we going to change? What's the future looking like? And I think if we keep that in mind, and we do a tremendous amount of promotion from within, and in our business that's easy to do, I think that there's ways to stay ahead. But I think in the end, we network. We spend a lot of time working with, for example, again, with NMSDC and others. But it's demonstrating on the floor every day that we can do the job and we can do it well. And then it helps because we're a minority-owned company. But I think first and foremost, we are a company that can prove ourselves and get the job done right and for the best for our customers.
One advice I can give is if you're targeting a certain company, just be sure to do the research about the company, learn about them and what are their needs, and then go ahead and be prepared and approach them. Have the right marketing material. Make sure you set up a meeting and that you're there. So you're there in front of them often, so just remind them, I'm here, I'm here.
And I think on AT&T's side, we spend somewhere between $13 billion to, it may have ticked up to $15 billion with the final numbers last year with minority companies. But I think the important message is that we're looking for the best supplier for the job. It doesn't matter after that. We're engaged, we're focused on identifying minority suppliers, and clearly we've identified minority suppliers who are the best man for the job because we have had a history of significant spend. I think that's a good message for us, and it's a good message for the minority suppliers too. In order for us to be successful in this program, We have to have proved to our buyers that the suppliers that we've identified and those that they've chosen that are minority have done an outstanding job. And clearly they have, because when contracts are up for renewal and they go back out to bid, it is very often the case that minority supplier is going to re-win contracts, and then they continue to grow within AT&T. So the message is just be the best that you can be in the business that you're in, and then, oh, by the way, you're a minority supplier.
Thank you. So let's give our panelists a round of applause and thank them for being here with us today. I'd like to say one last thing, and that's that I've now heard this comment several times. So over the weekend, I had the opportunity to be with the Corporate Achievers Summit, which is the alumni program of the Young Hispanic Corporate Achievers Program. And it was in a session that was with Dr. Bill Klepper, who most of you heard yesterday during the afternoon. And he said almost the exact same thing about having to continually reinvent yourself so that you don't go extinct. And I think that that is really important. And it sort of cuts across all aspects of life. And here we're talking about it in terms of suppliers, getting them to sort of reinvent what they're doing, reinvent how they're doing their businesses so that they can continue to grow and thrive for our companies as well, but also for the research institutes. So as many of you know, those of you who do participate in the CII, that we are reinventing the CII. So in 2015, we're going to have a new set of criteria for that rating. And this is part of the conversation that helps us to inform what the important questions are that we should be asking in the procurement section to make sure that we're rewarding companies for the things that they're doing well, but still challenging them to continue to reinvent themselves and what they're doing so that they're able to continually grow and move forward. So thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Dr. Garcia, and all of our panelists for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this research panel. A lot of information that is fresh in many cases and insightful in most cases, in all cases, as a matter of fact. We're going to take a 15-minute break and then meet here in the Celestial Room for our next business session with Javier Goizueta. Thank you.
We're set up to manufacture. We have a mind to manufacture. We build things here in Detroit. My family moved from Mexico and moved to Detroit in 1917. My mother taught me to be an entrepreneur. My mother was a seamstress in the neighborhood. We're very progressive. We invented a thing called a bumper post sleeve, and what a bumper post is what stops your car from hitting a building. And I said, well, why can't we just slide a sleeve over it and never have to paint it again? Voila, it worked, and we sell thousands every day. You would not believe on what the internet has done for Ideal Shield.
The web has really changed our business at Ideal because people could basically go on a browser, type in words to describe our product, and voila, we're found. We use Google AdWords to advertise our products online. I showed my boss, we just spent $500 this week in AdWords, but I just got you $10,000.
pensé que necesitaba un sitio para que mi negocio creciera.
La presencia de una página web es muy clave para el progreso de una compañía pequeña, porque toda la gente en el mundo te puede encontrar.
La enorme mayoría de las personas que utilizan el internet lo utilizan para hacer compras. Y me imagino que ustedes están buscando compradores, así que por eso que es tan importante.
Una página web te va a dar mucho más ventas, te va a dar mucho más reconocimiento que simplemente la palabra de un cliente a otro cliente.
No fue duro para nada, me ayudó mucho lo que fue la ayuda que tuvo Google para ayudarnos, hasta lo pude terminar en la casa sola.
El venir aquí en este evento, ver la simplicidad de cómo es tener tu propia website, cómo aprender los productos de Google, me tenía un poco como nervioso, pero cuando vine aquí todo eso fue fácil.
He aprendido cómo hacer un website, en menos de 10 minutos pudimos hacer un website.
Yo estoy contento porque ayer me dio el primer resultado, que fue que tomé ya un cliente gracias específicamente a AdWords.
Como consumidor, uno consume productos todo el tiempo, pero también como negocio puedes tener tus puertas abiertas todo el tiempo.
Con la ayuda de Google tengo un sitio bueno y fue bien fácil de hacer y vamos a poder seguir adelante y crecer nuestro negocio.